You're listening to Keeping Up with the Knights, a podcast for the faculty and staff at Steele High School, allowing them to connect outside of the classroom. Teacher, coach, mentor, and speaker Michael Herrera, a past District Teacher of the Year, will sit down with fellow teachers and bring their stories to life. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these stories as they unfold on this episode of Keeping Up with the Knights.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Mr. Ellis, for joining me on this episode of Keeping Up with the Knights. I have the pleasure of sitting down with you. You are a forensic science teacher here for us at Steele High School, and I just want to spend some time getting to know you and allow our audience to get to know you. So thank you for joining me on this episode.
Thanks for having me, Coach.
Hey, you bet, man. So the first part of the podcast I call bell ringers. A lot of teachers have some kind of warm up or bell ringer at the beginning of the class just to kind of, warm them up for what you're going to teach them for the day. So I want to kind of keep that same kind of formation, if you will, and ask you 5 quick questions about yourself or just about life. And then you'll shoot 5 back at me. All right.
Sounds good, man.
All right, let's do this. All right. So question number 1, man, if you could go back in time to your younger self, what would you tell a younger you?
Don't play Little League baseball.
All right. Why?
Because I was trash. I was the kid in Little League that they put in right field. Does that give you an indication of how bad of a player I was?
All right. So you picked up a bunch of flowers then, huh?
That's exactly. And then blowing little dandelions and stuff. It was fantastic.
That was you. All right. Well, you know what? My son played soccer for the first time. He's 4 years old, and all the other kids seem to be chasing the soccer ball. Meanwhile, my son's making circles at center field. I'm like, the coach's son. Hey, you know what? As long as he's having fun, that's all that matters, man.
It's all that matters, man. It's all that
matters. All right. So in terms of music, we actually just had a little discussion about music a little while ago. So I'm going to ask you kind of a music question. What genre of music best describes you?
Oh, classic rock, man.
Classic rock. I wouldn't expect anything else different. So, all right. Question number 3. So don't take this the wrong way, and I'll kind of explain, but let me ask the question first. If you could be trained by anyone in any profession, who would you want to train you? So this is not like a physical fitness thing. It could be, but like if you can go out and get trained by anybody, who would you want to train you, and what would it be?
I don't know if this is necessarily a training thing, but it would have to be Michael Jordan, man. Simply because of his work ethic and drive to win. I remember my dad's a UNC Chapel Hill graduate, and I remember watching Michael Jordan all the way through his career in college and through NBA. But his drive and his work ethic and wanting to win, and the story, he didn't make varsity his sophomore year, and so just to push. If you could train me, I'm sure that's ingrained, but if you could get me to have that drive and not let the bastards get you down, I would love that.
So it wouldn't necessarily be basketball, but you would want him to basically coach you, train you on some aspect of life to help you.
Life coach, that's
there you go. Yeah, no, there is, absolutely. And I like that answer too, because I think oftentimes that's what we need, even in our profession, right? We need to have people that we try to model our behaviors after, whether it's in the classroom or in life. And what that's the interesting, man. Little digression here. When you have someone like that, that's so true. If you can have someone in your life to train you, because sometimes, like even me as a basketball player, man, I was out every single day working out in the morning. I would go run 2 or 3 miles, and I'm talking about as early as probably 6th, 7th grade. I just knew that I had to do something different when everyone else is either sleeping or whatever. And so I would go out and I'd play basketball in the morning, and I'd work out, and I'd come up with all these different drills. This is back, obviously no internet, no YouTube, nothing like that, right? So you had to be creative. Well, I grew up in a poor family, so we couldn't, afford to go to 24-hour fitness or whatever. So, dude, I can remember filling up milk jugs and making cement out of them, and those were my weights. I had to be creative, but yet to be coached and trained by someone, I thought I was doing something right, but I wasn't doing something good enough to take my game to the next level. So that's so true, man. I like your answer, and it's awesome that you use basketball too. All right. Question number 4. All right. So go back in time, and if you could give yourself a high five, right? Give yourself a high five for something that you did. What would you give yourself a high five for?
I'd give myself a high five. This is so dumb. I'd give myself a high five for coaching this sounds terrible, my first ex-wife through labor. I was a football coach. I never played football as a kid, but the moment that I never read the books either, like what to expecting. I always told her I did because that's what husbands do, right? And I remember, I guess I motivated her, and she's like, I guess she's like about 400 hours of labor. And she said I did a good job. I'm like, dude, I guess I did do a good job. So I would say high five for helping Cheryl get through pregnancy and do the delivery.
Awesome.
That makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, last one for you. So you're not a teacher, right? Like you go into a different profession. What would be your other profession if you were not teaching?
Good question. I'd be a helicopter pilot. Totally.
Are you a pilot or no?
No. That's
okay.
I'm thinking I'm going to have 2 jobs when I retire. It's going to be Lowe's, because I'm going to sell you guys some stainless steel kitchen appliances. And I'm also going to be a chopper pilot. That's what I want to do.
All right, man. Hey, maybe you'll take us for a tour around San Antonio in a helicopter,
Let's go.
All right. Sweet. All right, man. Well, those are your 5. Go ahead and shoot 5 back at me.
All righty. They're going to be kind of generic.
Gotcha.
Like what got you into coaching, man?
So for me, it was, probably as early as first grade when I started playing basketball. But in terms of the reality of actually coaching basketball, probably came when I was at Texas Tech. I always knew I wanted to probably teach and coach once I realized that, my NBA dreams were not going to happen. But I tell a lot of people that my dreams were actually still to be in the NBA, but I wanted to be a team physician. That was my goal. Like my dream growing up as a kid was to take the Spurs doctor's place when he retires. Like that was just my dream, man. So, that kind of changed when you realize you got to go to school for 13 more years. So, I played a little bit of college basketball, played high school basketball, kind of got into this idea of being a teacher when I did a grad assistantship at Texas Tech. And I actually taught basketball there, started coaching a little bit AAU, and I was like, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do, man.
That's cool. That's cool. What's your greatest teaching moment?
I have many, but we had a conversation this morning about a young man that used to go to school here who we recently lost due to cancer. And it was actually when he was still alive, but so obviously I teach health science, right? So it should be a lot of medical content, but I like to throw in life lessons through my content. And there's a lesson that I do by Dave Ramsey about budgeting money and savings and investments and all this kind of stuff. So we pick a medical career and I take them through the process of doing a budget as if they were a physical therapist or a nurse or an anesthesiologist. And we have to create a year-long budget. And through that lesson, before he graduated, he came up to me and he showed me a picture of a white truck. And he goes, Coach, man, because of what you taught me my freshman year, I wanted to show you this picture because this is a truck that I bought for with cash. He saved up $18,000 and purchased his truck, and that was his senior gift to himself.
That's beautiful.
And so he wrote me this note and all this kind of stuff, and he was like, out of all the stuff that you taught me, yes, I loved the healthcare stuff, but you taught me life lessons. And so that's kind of my philosophy as a teacher. There's more to my content. It's trying to get these kids to become masters of life. And so that was validation for me that what I was doing spoke to at least one person. If I can effectively reach one kid, then my job is a success, right? So that's my teaching moment.
Quality stuff, man. How about if you had to do it all over again? Kind of like your question, you had to do it all over again. What would you do with your life?
With my life? So, it's interesting that you asked that because, some of you guys know because of social media that I'm also doing a second podcast for basketball and coaches and fans and talking hoops and stuff. And I actually have an interview today after school where I get to talk to the coach that gave me a phone call. I didn't get recruited to play college basketball. I wanted to play college basketball. And back then in the late 90s, like, I don't know if I was just naive, but I never knew about D2 and D3 and NAIA. Like, your mind was just always set on D1 basketball, right? So in hindsight, man, I really wish that I would have known more about that. But the coach I'm going to talk to today is actually the coach that gave me a phone call my junior year in college after 2 days of tryouts and said, "Hey, man, can you be at practice tomorrow?" And I was like, "You mean I made the team?" And that's a D1 basketball team that just the year before almost made it to the Final Four. We lost to North Carolina in the Elite Eight by 4 points to get into the Final Four. So this, University of Tulsa is a small D1 school, but yet at that time, they were the second winningest program behind Duke. So for me to make that team was validation. So to answer your question, man, if I were to go back in time, what I know now as a high school basketball coach and teacher, I would have tried to become an equipment manager. I know that sounds really weird, right? But a lot of equipment managers become grad assistants. Grad assistants become third assistants, which becomes second assistants. And that was when Bill Self was there.
Nice.
Okay. And then Buzz Peterson came through, who's also in North Carolina, best friends with Michael Jordan and his, his best man. And then Coach Phillips was the coach after that. Well, then I went to Texas Tech and Bobby Knight was there with his son, right? And now Chris Beard, who's the coach there. So it's like, a lot of people say, "Hey, do you have any regrets in life?" And they give this cliche statement like, "No, everything happens for a reason." And I get that. But for me, if I could go back and do it all over again, man, I would go back and I'd be an equipment manager. So who knows where I'd be as a college coach today.
That's perfect. That's
awesome. A long answer, dude. But hey, man, you got my wheels turning.
It's depth, brother. It's depth. I got 2 more questions? All right. Let's see. This is kind of dumb. If you were a superhero, what would your theme song be, man?
You know what? I'm going to answer the first thing that pops into my mind, right? It's the Final Countdown. I don't know why. And I don't know if that's good because that might mean like my theme song to death or something, but the Final Countdown, that kind of sounds weird just saying that. But like, I just love that song in the Chicago Bulls era, right? Like that music just plays in my head, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Who was that by? Is that Journey?
That's Europe.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, my bad. Not Journey, cool. Europe. Yeah.
It's all good. Hair metal. Last question is, this is actually a question asked of me during a psychological interview for some law enforcement stuff. And it totally caught me off guard. I was not expecting it. The question is, if you had to live out the rest of your life as an animal, which one would it be and why?
Dude, so normally I would answer, like, if you asked me what my favorite animal would, it would be a cheetah. But to live out the rest of my life, God dang, man. And now all these, like, psychotherapists are going to, like, interpret my answer here. So I see what you're doing here, man. That's very wrong of you. I could probably give you 10 different answers with 10 different reasons based on the animal. But if my favorite animal is a cheetah, man, I guess I'm going cheetah. I just think they're mean, they're fierce, and they're fast. And I like running, so,
Perfect fit, man.
There you go, man. There you go. I like that. I like that question. But, since I am the host of the show here, I'd probably say turtle, like an old school, like turtle, just moving slow through life and chilling on the beach, man.
Soaking it all in.
Yeah, just soaking it all in. All right, so let's get this thing started, man. So let's start by talking a little bit about your childhood, like where you grew up, like where you're from. Talk about like your elementary, middle school, high school years. Like, talk to us a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing.
All righty. Well, I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I probably lived there about 26 minutes. My dad's job, he would get a job offer somewhere and he'd pick us up and move. I probably went to about 7 or 8 different elementary schools and junior highs. I spent the vast majority of my upbringing was in Daytona Beach, Florida, where I learned how to surf very, very poorly. I was terrible. Went to high school, went to 3 different high schools, one of which was in Amarillo, Texas, here in Amarillo. And I don't ever, it's kind of like my brain blocks out that whole city. There's something about that town just kind of, and then we moved to Tallahassee, and up there for my sophomore and junior year. And that's where I actually met Bobby Bowden. And I didn't even know who he was when I first moved. I was cutting grass with a friend. I'm like, oh my God, it's, Bobby Bowden's house. I'm like, who's that? Like, just because I'm stupid. And so I met him there. And then my senior year, we moved back to Daytona. I graduated from a small Catholic school. That explains a lot, I think. And it was fantastic. It was small. The enrollment was capped at 350 students, but it was absolutely fantastic because I grew up most of my life through being Catholic, and graduating from a Catholic school was amazing. not that I'm religious or anything like that, but just what I learned there about myself and about it, just interactions were great. And I remember as a kid, I used to get very, very angry at my dad because we'd move around so much. But now that I look back, it's like that was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me. I've learned to adapt to just about any situation just because I've moved around so often. I went to college at Florida State, got my bachelor's and master's in criminology there because what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a law enforcement guy, run, jump, tackle, and shoot. Awesome, man. TJ Hooker. And then I joined the military after that because I figured I'm going to go federal law enforcement. Eventually, I wanted to teach. So I joined the military intelligence. I was a Russian linguist. And I'm like, dude, this is a foot in the door. Languages is one of those big things for the FBI. And then I got shot at. And, dude, I changed my tunes. It's like, in Star Wars, the stormtroopers miss. They miss everything. In the real world, dude, these guys hit. So I'm like, there's no es bueno. So I kind of steered away from that. And then what I ended up doing most of the time in the military was teaching. All kinds of stuff. And I loved it. And my parents told me 3 things to never do in my life. The first thing was to never become a teacher. The other one was never join the military. And then the third one was don't ever get married. What do my parents know? I did all 3 of those things. Trifecta, baby. Did all 3 of those things. And it's just funny because as you grow up, as you're a little kid, a little pee-wee squat, right? Your parents are godlike. They're deities. Then as you become a teenager, your parents are morons. And then as you become an adult, you sit back, you're like, dude, my parents were Gandalf the Great. Gandalf. They were wizards, Gandalf the White. And I look back, and it's amazing. Like I said, when I was younger, I hated my parents for what they did. But I look back now like, good gosh, it's just amazing. My dad always says, son, you guys are successful in spite of me, not because of me. And when I was a kid, I'm like, dude, what the heck does that even mean? Yep. But now that I'm old, I'm like, dude, he is on the spot. Like I have 3 sisters, and both my parents were retired teachers. They're in education. I have 3 sisters. My oldest she was a social worker. She recently passed away here in April. She was a social worker, great at her job. This is horrible. My favorite sister is a special ed teacher in North Carolina, and then my youngest sister is an LPN. And so we come from a family of givers, and it's just, and I think all this is because of how we were raised. My parents, we learned to just adapt, and we helped each other, which caused us to help other people. And I guess that's how I ended up in this gig.
So let me go backwards, man. I like to rewind here. Did I just hear Mr. Ellis say that he got shot? Or you got shot at?
Shot at. I was shot at. And that right there, I call it pucker factor. You don't know anything in life until you're being shot at. And dude, it's called a crack thump. You hear the crack of the rifle going off and the thump. The thump is the bullet flying by your head. And I thank people in this particular area for being bad snipers. Because if you have a forehead the size of this and you miss, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful. But I do have a small threat. I was actually, when I was in college, I was at a friend's house, and we had just watched Terminator 2. And there's one scene in Terminator 2 where Arnold Schwarzenegger's got like that shotgun. It's like a lever action shotgun, and he's firing it, and he's slinging it, and he's firing. I thought that was just so cool. So I figured I would try it with my buddy's BB gun. Don't do this. That night, I actually shot myself in both legs with one BB. And I had forgotten about this thing. And a couple weeks ago, I went to get some x-rays on my knees. And the lady's like, the x-ray tech's like, hey, you ever been hit with a BB? I'm like, no. I didn't. I was embarrassed. I could say, oh, show us with a BB. And sure enough, right there, a couple inches from my knee, you could see the BB in the x-ray. It is sweet, man.
Dude, so it penetrated skin and went in, and it's still in there.
Dude, this one, because you're pumping it. Oh, I got to make this really, really strong, and it penetrated my skin. The BB is in the X-ray.
Man, check that out. So you're the guy setting off the alarms at the airport.
That's exactly what I'm doing. And you know kind of how embarrassing that is. Like, so what happened to you? I was numb or whatever. What about no? I took a BB in the leg.
So crazy side tangent here. So I've actually been shot by a BB gun too. There's BB guns and there's is it a pellet gun?
Yes.
Right? Hell, I don't remember which one it is, man. But 2 houses down, man. I'm shooting hoops in my backyard in high school. This dude's shooting birds in his tree, man. That thing ricochets off his tree 2 houses down and shoots me right in the thigh of my left leg. And so I'm a little kid. I'm like, I've been shot. I've been shot, right? I thought he shot me, and he's like, no, I'm trying to shoot the birds. But anyway, man. Hey, the second thing I wanted to rewind back to is you talked about how you take back some of those moments growing up in a Catholic school. And that's what you and I have in common is I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade. And again, that's precisely why I like to do this podcast, because the whole point of this podcast is for teachers to connect outside the classroom. You and I know each other. You and I have conversations with each other. You and I will sit and chat and talk about a kid that we're trying to help or something like that. But that's typically where the conversation stops, right? Like, hey, it's all student driven, but we don't as a faculty and staff spend time getting to know each other. So that's my hope is through this podcast, people hear your story, people hear me talk, and they get to know us when under normal circumstances, they're probably not going to. And it's no fault of their own. It's just a byproduct of education, right? So, you know, you and I had that in common. And I always try to tell people that although I didn't like Catholic school, kind of like what you talked about parents, right? Parents are like the almighty, and then all of a sudden, like, you hate them, and then you like, oh my gosh, you like they're almighty again. And that's what I say about Catholic school is like, I hated it. I hated the structure, but man, I love the structure. And I think that's a lot of times what our students go through in our classrooms, because they love the classrooms where they get to do whatever the heck they want to. They get to use their cell phones, they get to talk, they get to sleep, they do whatever. But that same student can go into like my classroom where I'm highly structured. I don't allow sleep. I don't allow cell phones, but they're super respectful and responsive in my classroom. Kids will do what you allow them to do, right? And so for me, what I took away from Catholic school is it taught me the discipline that I have in my own life that I carry with me through my high school years, my college years, and now as a professional. I attribute that to my Catholic school upbringing. You know, is that kind of the same for you?
Oh, absolutely. Completely.
Well, because if you didn't, man, those nuns would slap the crap out of your hands, you know? And back then, and I'm 40 years old. I'll say it, but like, dude, like the paddle still existed back then. You know what I'm saying? So like you did everything you could not to go there. So we got to bring that paddle back, man.
Pain with an action. Self-correcting problem.
Yeah. Well, hey, we talked. You kind of touched a little bit on it, but you kind of took the question away from me. Talk a little bit about college, your college experiences, and maybe something that either happened to you or that you experienced that kind of molded you as an adult, right? Because when you're in college, you're a young adult. So kind of talk about college. Like, where'd you go again, and what'd you major in, and go ahead.
Okay, I went to Florida State University. That's Seminole through and through. I look at it, and it's so strange. It's a really good thing. How much do you take with you from high school to college? What is it, like 10%? Something like that. But it's the life lessons. And this kind of goes back to the whole Catholic upbringing. Excuse me. Maybe this is taboo for what we're talking about, but growing up Catholic, I was not exposed to a lot of different lifestyles. There was one night in particular, the girl whom I was dating, we went to this club right across the street from Florida State. And I look up on the marquee board, and it has like Wednesday nights, reggae night, Thursday nights, country night, Friday nights, contemporary, and nothing for Saturday. And then Sunday it said 80s or old wave. And so it happened to be on a Saturday night. Like, I'm standing in line, and the only girl in line is the girl I'm dating. I'm like, that's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. And so I get inside, and it turned out it was called Alternative Lifestyle. And like I said, I was went through Catholic schools, and I wasn't exposed to all these different things. And it was not until that night, I was like a junior in college, that I had not ever seen the whole, once again, I'm not sure if this is the homosexual thing. I was not exposed to that. And that was that night I realized, when that sounds rude, they are just like us. I remember watching somebody try to pick up somebody else, and it's the same gender. I'm like, that's what we do, And that was one of the most, I guess, is that a humanizing event? It made me realize, oh my gosh, we're all here for the same reason. We're here to live life and do great things. And it wasn't necessarily something I learned in undergrad, in a classroom, or in grad school. It was that night I'm like, there are different people out there now. And it was that night that my eyes were open. It was such a strange thing. And we just kind of sat back and we're flies on the wall and we watched this happen. It's like, and they, quote unquote, were just like everybody else. And it was, I mean, like I said, I'm not sure if that's off color for this topic, but that was one of the most impressionable evenings I ever had in my life. Makes sense?
And how old are you?
How old was I?
Mm-hmm. At that time?
I was 22.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Like we have, and even in high school, and that's why I said earlier, you know, my goal as a teacher is to help and assist in students becoming masters of life, not masters of my content.
Amen.
Because the master of content is not going to happen in my classroom. Because like you said, what do they take with them to college? I don't care, 10, 20, 30, whatever. They're not taking everything. But what are they taking? They're taking what Mr. Ellis talks about life in his classroom.
Absolutely.
The stories that maybe Coach Leach talks about in his classroom. The budget experience that Coach Herrera gave in his medical assignment. They take that with them to college while they're working on a major. So they can perfect their craft and they can master that content so they get that degree. But even within mastering that content, they're still mastering life. And hopefully they have professors and academic advisors, but the experiences that you get in college shape you as an adult.
Absolutely.
The exposure, you're exposed to so much, right? College was definitely the time of my life, man. I loved it. All right. So you graduated college, right? Let's take our audience through the progression of getting into teaching and kind of what steps you kind of took along the way to getting here to Steele High School.
All righty. Okay. So joined the military, was a teacher, taught most of the time there, got out and like, you know, hey, I'm gonna become a teacher. When I got out of the military, I went back to get my certification over at UTSA. And it was just really, really cool. Because at the time, I guess I was in my 30s, non-traditional student. And so I'm seeing all these young ones and going through school at the same time as them again. And I was like, this is really, really neat. And you meet these guys who are like in their 60s going back to school, and you got the other kids who are 18, still the zit-faced punks. They're straight out of high school. Hey, and then there's you, and it's just amazing. And so college hasn't changed that much in that, but I mean, I guess there's more of a non-traditional student there. So I got my certification. That was a total segue. I apologize. Hey, ADD, how you doing? I got my certification, and my first teaching gig was at East Central High School. So I cut my teeth there, and I was there, I guess, about 5-6 years, and then I ended up here at Steele. And they always say the grass is greener. And that, in my case, it was. But I'm going to tell you something that I've seen over the 15 plus years I've been teaching. It doesn't matter which school you're teaching at, or kids are kids. Kids learn the way they learn on the east side. They learn the same way in the east side, west side, south. Kids are kids. They're here for the experience. They're here for one of two reasons, because they have to be, or they're here for their friends. And I think that the social aspect, to me, we are all social creatures. The social aspect of school is beautiful, and high school is timeless. You kind of like, when you go, you graduate, you go back to your 20-year reunion. It's like you never left. You know what I'm saying? And that was one of the drives on why I became a teacher. So I cut my teeth. I'm digressing, man.
No, it's okay. Actually, that's the next question is why do you teach? So go ahead and go there.
Okay. I teach because my entire life I was exposed to some great teachers. I keep in touch with, like, Timothy Hildebrand, my 5th and 6th grade math, science, and social studies teacher. I still keep in touch with him on social media. The guy made such a huge impression on me that I wanted to go into teaching. My father taught me things. My mom, of course, gotta love mom. Gotta throw a shout in there for mom. My sister, everybody has a story, Mike, and we learn from everybody's stories. And what I want to do is, as a teacher, I want kids to learn from my story. That's why I do it, man. It's fun. We get paid to practice our stand-up comedy, and
Some of us.
And to give these guys some content knowledge, And like we said, 10% of what they learn in high school, the academics they take with them, but it's those life experiences, those stories that they hear that that's really, really great. And that's why I do it. These kids are amazing. From top to bottom, side to side, these kids are amazing. You can teach the number one kid, or you can teach the number 638 or 638. These kids are awesome, and that's why I do it. I want them to learn. I want them to experience life, because I know, I've made mistakes in my life, but I've had a blast in my life. When I check out of here, I want to be like, you know what? My life was awesome. And hopefully I'm able to impart some of that on my students.
Absolutely. Well, hey, man, so Coach Herrera is doing this podcast, Keeping Up with the Knights, man. But I know that I can pass the torch on to you, man. So if my God takes me away tomorrow, man, just pick up. You can have the mic. You can have all this kind of stuff, because you just kind of went through my next 3 questions.
I'm sorry.
Naturally. No, that's a great thing. No, that you're exactly right, man. Those experiences and those lessons that we can share with our kids. But you said something that I'll ask you kind of a little side tangent question here is, you said no matter where you go, the students are the same.
Yes.
Right? Is it true for teachers though? So what I mean by that is, like, you went from East Central to Steele.
Yes.
I've only been here. I've been here 15 years, man. Like, as a coach and as a teacher, there's some pros to that and there's some cons to that. I've never experienced other cultures, other faculties, other students. All I know is Steele students, but I do also know that they're still students and they're still teenagers, right? So, like, a teenager is a teenager coming through these doors. But for you, and I don't need you to like name names or talk about the culture of East Central, but the point is it a true statement, do you think, to say that kids are kids but teachers are teachers? Or do you think truly the school can be different from school to school?
Oh, the climate is definitely set by leadership. And there's nothing, East Central is a different mindset than Steele.
Mm-hmm.
Teacher to teacher, teachers are teachers, man. You got the hardcore teachers that get here at 4:30 in the morning and they're here till 3:30 in the morning that next day. You got the other guys that are jokey. The teachers are teachers, and we all, especially in what's going on with this COVID stuff, man, we are all experiencing the same thing. It doesn't matter where you go. The teachers are teachers, but leadership sets the climate. I guess remember the Titans?
Yeah.
Is it attitude reflects, what is it? Attitude reflects leadership.
Yeah.
And it's so true. When the leadership is there, it is reflected in their faculty. When the leadership is there, the teacher leadership is reflected in the students. The students will emulate their teacher. The teachers will emulate their leader, their principal.
Yeah, and so true. And so when I have conversations with people in other districts or other schools, very biasedly, I talk about how awesome it is here at Steele High School. And they ask me stuff like, why, talk about Steele and the teachers and why is it so good and blah, 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 right? But I mean, this is all I know. So to hear that it's not like that in other places, that kind of, triggers me. And that's why I wanted to do this podcast, because maybe a listener at some point will hear the faculty of Steele High School talk and what makes us different. And collectively so far in all my interviews so far, you guys always talk about things other than content. Talking about relationships with kids, life lessons, and I posted on social media yesterday, about building relationships or blending relationships. And I think sometimes teachers, and I'm not here to toot my own horn or anything like that, but this is just my way of thinking. You can't blend relationship building in your lessons. You have to build relationships and then you blend your content.
Absolutely.
So I use the analogy of when you build a house, you don't pour the concrete and put the framework up at the same time, right? So you can't do that in teaching either. Like, the framework that is essential in education has to be built upon the foundation of relationships first. So kids trust you and they want to model your behavior and the way of thinking and your outlook on life. So no, definitely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, man. So let's change. New question here. What is your definition of success in the classroom?
Wow. That's actually a really good question.
Because it's different for everybody, man. But like for you, so I don't need like, the cookie. Yeah, I don't need the cookie cutter answer, man. Like, what's your answer? Like, how do you define success in your classroom? When do you know that Mr. Ellis is successful?
I'm going to say my philosophy in the classroom is if you get a kid to laugh, you get a kid to learn, without a doubt.
I like it.
It's just how it is. I want the kids, and it's like you'll type up a midterm or final review, and you have this. It's like 2 or 3 pages long of all this stuff, and the kid's like, "Dude, there's no way we've learned all this stuff in this class." And then they look at it like, "Oh my gosh, we did learn." I want these kids to learn without feeling like they're learning. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so I know that I have succeeded when I give them that midterm review or that final review, and they're like, "Dude, this is trash. We haven't done this." Oh my gosh, I know all these things. I know that they're learning, but they're having a good time doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like the time is passing by and they don't even realize that they're also learning all this stuff too.
Absolutely. That's how I measure my success.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. Good deal. You already kind of answered this, but I don't know if now that I'm asking you this direct question, if the teacher still holds its place. But who is a teacher that you will always remember, and what about them made them so special?
It was Timothy Hildebrandt.
Okay.
Without a doubt. Our Lady of Lourdes, mid-'80s, math, science, social studies teacher. He was amazing because, once again, we would learn so much stuff in there about life. When we messed up, we messed up. He'd put us on military time. He'd lock us down. And he would share stories with us, and we would play trivia as a set of breaks. Like we've just covered something difficult. He would have trivia games, and this is back before Mr. Cosby was making bad choices. He would actually play Bill Cosby humor on albums, and it was funny because the stuff that Bill Cosby was talking about was learning stuff, and some of these things were like, oh my gosh, this is real life stuff. And Mr. Hildebrandt's teaching us real life stuff. Bill Cosby is teach us real life stuff. And it's just, he is where I learned from Timothy Hildebrandt this was not explicitly stated. I learned that in order to be an effective communicator, you talk to people, not at them. And it was that small lesson I took away. You talk to somebody, not at them, they're going to be receptive, and they're going to learn. They're going to learn. Does that answer your question?
No, absolutely. When you said that, it reminds me of a scene in the movie Patch Adams, when Robin Williams is the doctor, Patch Adams, going through medical school, and he's with a bunch of other medical students walking down the hall, and the teachers, doing the whole walking backwards kind of thing, right, and pointing at stuff, and they come across this patient that's in the hallway. And the doctor, the teacher, starts talking about the patient as we'll use COVID as an example, right? So this is our COVID patient right here, blah, blah, her signs and symptoms, A, B, C, D, E. And then so Patch Adams, Robin Williams goes, excuse me, what's her name? And the whole group kind of looked at him like, how dare you ask that question? Like, she doesn't have a name. She's a disease, right? She's a patient.
Absolutely.
And dehumanizing versus humanizing our students, right? Like we have to recognize, so we have to talk to them, not at them. And you know what, man, in my early educational career, I was given a bad piece of advice. And, sometimes we learn how to do things by what not to do. And I was specifically told that do not be friends with these kids. You are the authoritative figure and you must uphold blah, 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 right? Well, as a brand new teacher, in my heart, I was like, what? In my mind, like as this person's talking to me, man, like the movies like Dangerous Minds are popping through my head. And I'm like, man, what am I getting ready to go into? Because like all I see is a blank classroom. I'm setting up, you're doing your first day activities. I've never student taught. What did I get myself into? Like, okay, so here we go. Like first day of school, man, this is the way I'm going to be. And man, it didn't take long at all, man. when you see those bright-eyed kids coming into the classroom, much like we are going to on Tuesday with these kids coming into the classrooms, man, they're just kids, man. How do you get into this field and not want to be friendly? I know there's a difference of being their friend, but what's that definition of friend? Well, I can be friendly with these kids, but like you talked about, you said Hildebrand, right? Okay. He was also to hold you guys accountable.
Yep.
You can't hold people accountable if you're totally just their friend, right? So like, I understand the differences, but bottom line is, you know, we have to humanize them. They are humans first before they're our students, right? And it's the same thing with like sports, right? They're student athletes. They're students before they're athletes, but they're humans before they're students. They're just kids, right? All right. So next question for you. Do you think that relationships should be at the center of teaching? If so, what I'm really trying to get here is, how do you specifically in your classroom keep relationships at the center of teaching in your classroom?
Excellent question there, Teach. You know, when you first go through your teaching, the rigor, relevance, and relationships. Remember that?
Well said.
And I always thought, like, dude, because I got into teaching a little bit later in life. That's totally dorked up as far as the order. The relationships first. I know, because we do, you know how it is. We have these pacing calendars. This is gospel. You're going to follow this. It's more of a guideline for me. I spend, honestly, the first week and a half, maybe even 2 weeks, getting to know my kids. I share stories with them about my life, just the dumb stories about a hamster bit me and I flung it into a ceiling fan. You know, I just dumb stuff. And I want these kids to be able to identify with me. Life, and earlier I said kids are kids, but the times have changed. We are teaching in a time when respect is earned. Going to Catholic schools, you know this, you walked in that door, that nun or that priest was standing there, you respected him simply because that was it. That's just how it was, dude.
Yep.
This is Father Mulligan, and you're going to respect me. You understand? Yes, Father Mulligan. Yes, Sister Annette. And it's not like that anymore. These kids come in and they're expecting an exchange. We as teachers, we have all kinds of hats. And first and foremost, a lot of people are going to disagree with it. I think that we are entertainers, because if these kids nowadays are not entertained, they're not going to learn. So you teach little, you talk little. You teach little, you talk little. That was unheard of when I was going through school. What was your question? I totally digressed.
Relationships being the center of your classroom, and what do you do to keep those relationships at the center?
You keep relationships at the center by letting your students know that you're human too. How many times have you gone to HEB and you're under a student there? Like, what are you doing here? Because they think that we live and breathe here. Yeah, I got a cot in the back, man. I actually live here. I got a kitchenette in my study, in my little room there. When they realize that we are humans too, they're like, oh my gosh, it's Mr. Ellis, it's Coach Herrera. They do just, you know, they buy SpaghettiOs just like we do. Relationships are the center because that's how the kids identify with you. That's just how it is. First and foremost, relationships. And once that's in place, the rigor and the relevance will just fall in. That's as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. You couldn't have said it any better. For me, I don't know if you knew this or not, but when I was district teacher of the year back in 2016, I got into public speaking, and I started going to different schools and districts and departments and going and giving this presentation. And the title of my presentation is, maybe it's not your students, maybe it's you, 25 reasons why you might suck as a teacher. Yeah. And so I go through this whole thing, but if I can sum up that presentation in one word, it's connections.
Absolutely.
That's what my whole presentation is about. Substitute that for relationships. Like, this is who I am, and this is why I asked this question, because I'm okay with hearing another teacher actually say, no, I don't think relationships are at the center. But it's just an engaging conversation. Let's have that conversation. What is the center of your, education? What is at the center of your classroom? Is it in fact your content? Let's talk about that, right? But I think they might be the minority. And I don't mean that really, but I really feel like most teachers, if not on this campus, because this climate is so good, that I think most people on this campus in terms of teachers focus on relationship building.
Absolutely.
Right? And you have to. So what I always like to do, so for you, it sounds like it's comedic relief, entertainment for you. playing your guitar or whatever it is that you want to do, because people always know Mr. Ellis is funny. But I always like to ask that question because, I've learned from Ms. Langford, and I've learned from other teachers that do something different in their class. Me personally, I do journaling, and the kids hate it, but I love it. Selfishly, I love it because I get to know them by asking them, man, sometimes pretty tough questions. Sometimes I put a quote, and those quotes are usually about life. What is your outlook on life, right? Sometimes I'll do music therapy where I'll play a song that I like or a song that has meaning. Okay, just respond to it. I don't care if you like the song or not. It's not about, I liked the beat or I didn't like the beat. No, listen to the song, the words of the song, and then respond to it. That allows me in their heart. That allows me in their brain, because now that if I know their heart and I know their brain, now, okay, I'm going to teach you about the cardiovascular system now. Like, let's talk about the 4 chambers of the heart and the flow of a red blood cell. Like, because only then can I reach that kid, right? Yes. That very easy statement. Kids don't care how much you know until you know how much they care, right? So, I'm right there with you, man. I'm really appreciating the conversation we're having right now. So let's kind of wrap things up, man. My last question for you is, and I love doing this because I think that's what this is all about. I'm sure as a teacher for you, you appreciate those days when you get an email or you get a thank you card or you get some kind of message from the foreign language department when they send you like a thank you note, right? That edifies you and it builds you up as a teacher. Like, man, this is why I'm here, right? Because this kid is thanking me.
Yes.
But going back to the reason why I do this podcast is we don't take time as a faculty to recognize other teachers. We don't take time to get to know other teachers. We're so student driven, we forget about ourselves, right? So I would like to give you the floor here and allow you to thank any teacher here on campus. So who would that be and why would you want to thank them?
Oh, wow. That's a nice little shout out moment.
It is. That's exactly what this is.
That's good stuff there. And it's a tough question because there are so many.
And that's what everybody says, man. And my hope is that I know you've got other names in your head, that the more interviews I do, those people are getting shout outs. But I need you to name one person that's just, man, you just need to thank them and why.
It would have to be Dan Alonzo, man. If you've ever had a chance to talk to that guy, he runs the gamut. You want to know about history? You talk to that guy. He knows so much. He's been through so many life experiences. And when you talk to him, he's a great storyteller. He takes you back and he puts you in the setting of whenever he was working in the hospital and he saw these things, these very, very horrible things, but he's able to put a humor spin on it. He's a great storyteller. And life is all about stories, Mike, as far as I'm concerned. And Dan Alonzo is it's amazing. It's amazing.
That's awesome. Well, Mr. Alonzo, if you're hearing this, man, shout out to you for impacting Mr. Ellis's life. But, man, Mr. Ellis, I tell you what, you've mentioned it a couple of times on this podcast, and you talked about stories, right? Life lessons. And truth be told, this podcast was not originally called Keeping Up with the Knights. It was called What's Your Story? It
awesome.
Really was. That was the title of this podcast. And then, forgive me, whoever you are on campus, but somebody recommended Keeping Up with the Knights. And I was like, man, it's kind of a spinoff on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Like, I get it. It sounds good. Keeping Up's got the K. It's got the other K, Keeping Up with the Knights. And so here it is. But ultimately, Keeping Up with the Knights is about sharing your story. And that's precisely what we did today. That's what this purpose is behind this podcast. So, Mr. Ellis, man, I appreciate you being on this podcast today, man. I hope you have a wonderful and blessed day.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, bud.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Keeping Up with the Knights. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure you subscribe and click the notification button so you know when the next episode is released, and then share it with your friends and colleagues. If you're so inclined to do so, would you please rate and review this podcast to help me grow our community of listeners? I hope there was something that you heard today that allowed you to connect outside the classroom. Now, more than ever, we need each other as a support system, and we need to continue to make this the best high school in the state of Texas. Thank you, Knight Nation. Now, go be someone's champion today.